Hello, it looks and we are recording. So welcome, Miss Jennifer Briggs. I am so excited to have you on here today.
Thanks, Peggy. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you and I had a chat last week, and I don't know, why don't you just go right ahead and introduce yourself? Tell people who you are.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Jennifer Briggs, and I'm a licensed acupuncturist in Coos Bay, Oregon. Um, I have been in practice for 21 years, and most of my acupuncture practice centers around pain management. But I have a secondary interest that's actually huge in nutrition and just the different ways that people process food. So yeah, I've developed a program around that's online, and so I'm really excited about that. Just sharing that information with people can be so life-changing for them.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's awesome. And I know that you know that I'm passionate about helping families figure out how to heal themselves and heal their own families. And I feel like, in a way, when you're treating pain, sometimes that's at the other end of the spectrum, meaning like people have already been suffering for a long time. Like that pain often doesn't just show up overnight, like with the exception of like an accident or something that traumatic that happens, right? And so I love the idea of kind of teaching people about how do we start sooner.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so it's cool.
Absolutely. By the time it gets to a pain syndrome, you're exactly right. Often the underpinnings, the foundations have been there for years,
Yes,
sometimes since birth. You know.
yes, totally. Yes. And how does nutrition relate to pain? Like how did you go from treating pain with needles and Chinese medicine to like really going into nutrition, into that side of things?
Um, my original career goal when I was 15, it was to be an orthopedic surgeon.
Okay.
Okay. Now, it's one of those things where it's still that profession is still 90% male. And people shouldn't ask what 15-year-olds what they want to do. But that was my original career goal. So when I went into acupuncture, treating pain was really a natural kind of extension of that. And I always like to think that I actually got to do exactly what I wanted to do when I was 15, because really I don't do construction. And that's what orthopedic surgery really is.
Sure.
Um, so, in using the needles and using the trigger points and, being able to just kind of adjust the muscles so that, like the kneecap just pulls straight up and back and forth rather than off to one side. Um, that kind of work was always just really, really interesting to me. Um, Kind of just the mechanics of it and being able to do it without surgery and without drugs. But the nutrition piece for me actually grew more out of my own experience as a child. I had very bad asthma and allergies, kind of, bad enough to be hospitalized lots of times. I went to the doctor a lot. I liked going to the doctor. But I didn't like the medications because I don't know if you've ever taken asthma medication, but they're just all kind of like make me, they made me really jittery. They're all kind of like boost your,
Yeah.
um, and I liked going to the doctor. I liked everything about my treatment except for having to take those medications. Um, so when I was about 18, I got treated for acupuncture for an asthma attack. And it actually worked, which I was like, this is great because, I don't have to go to the hospital and get the like synthetic cortisone and, I could just kind of skip that whole thing and go straight to like being okay again. And I thought there was a lot of value in that. So that prompted me to go into Chinese medicine rather than taking a more traditional, going to Western medical school. And it was truly, I learned such a lot in Chinese medicine school. But the one sadness was that I still had the asthma and allergies, and I would still have to take Western medicine treatment for it, you know. And sometimes the herbs would work and sometimes they wouldn't, but so about 10 years ago, I was consulting with a friend down in New Mexico, who I went to school with, and he showed me a process. He basically like recommended that I change my diet in a certain way. And it was a really radical departure from how I had eaten in the past. And I thought about it and I was like, well, I might as well just try it. And by gum, there were several things that kind of like right away started to normalize in my body. My nose wasn't running quite as much. I always had the faucet nose. And I could actually walk up a hill and get a little asthmatic, but then it would go away. I wouldn't have to take the medicine. I always had kind of a tendency to have loose stools. Like sometimes in the middle of a meal, I would have to get up and go to the bathroom. And that stopped happening right away. I started sleeping better. Just all these things in my body kind of started to like normalize. And I remember telling him, actually, I was like, before I did this, I was like, I feel like I'm working at about 80% of like optimal health. And he was like, 80%, that's pretty good. And I know it is because, I work with people who are at like 50% of optimal health.
Right.
Or less, or, people are at all different places when they come in
Sure.
to see me.
Yeah.
But, it wasn't 3 or 4 weeks into that diet change. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm at like 90% or maybe even 95%. Do you know what I mean? It was like, it
Within
doesn't
3
sound
or
like
4 weeks, it happened
yes,
quickly.
yes, it did happen
Amazing.
quickly. It started going up like right away.
Yes.
So, it's a really great feeling to, like to be really close to, 98% of optimal health. I can do pretty much everything I need to do in a day now. Whereas before, I'd have to take a nap, or I would wish I could take a nap, you
Yes.
know?
Worry about eating out and worrying if you're going to have to go to the ladies' room in the middle of a meal. Like
Yeah,
it
absolutely. Am I
interferes with
going
your life.
to drip phlegm out of my nose onto my patients? I
Right.
mean, I was actually wearing masks sometimes if I would get a cold or something like that. Sometimes I would wear a mask before COVID because I would literally put like tissues in there and like put it, and it would just so that I literally wouldn't drip on my
It
patients.
was a faucet. You've had a faucet.
I know.
And I
It
know
lived right here.
a lot of kids run around with perpetual runny noses,
Oh, they
perpetual
do.
runny eyes and the dark circles under their eyes and, the
Yeah.
exhausted and they say, I don't like how these medications feel, you
Yeah.
know? So it sounds like you ended up going into a little bit of deeper dive into the nutritional stuff. And like I want families to have a better understanding. So this is a great, thank you for sharing your health story because, here you are, a medical practitioner, and you're still taking, asthma meds and still having a drippy nose and still having to run to the bathroom, even though you're like a healthy person.
Right.
And so
Right.
you were missing something. You were missing
Mhm.
something in your own health. And it's something I've come to realize is that we all have our own blind spots. And I'm gonna share with everyone what you said to me, that if you don't mind, like you said, talked about going to get, the testing, the skin testing for allergies. And,
Yes.
and I remember what you said to me. Would you mind sharing that you were avoiding going?
Yes. I was avoiding going. I had been tested that way when I was 12 and came up that I was allergic to wheat and dairy. And I felt like I needed to go and do that again, but I didn't want them to say that I couldn't eat wheat anymore because,
Right.
you know,
Because why?
I love bread. Bread is
Right.
cool, right?
Right.
And pasta.
Right.
And, you know,
Because I feel like really here you are, a health practitioner, and I love that because a lot of what happens with ourselves is our own mindset, our own limbic system, our own brain, but also the food itself. So it's, in a way, it's not our fault. So if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're like, see, there Peggy goes again, talk about no gluten, roll your eyes. But I want to say to people out there, it's not your fault. Like the wheat does that to us. It tricks us and it makes us say, no, of course I could never give up wheat. I could never give up my dairy, but I want people to know it's not your fault and you're not alone. Here we are, both of us have experienced very similar story, and we have our own resistance. So this is where having somebody help to guide us and help us through
yeah.
that first part, in a way, that's the hardest until you start seeing the results. And that motivates people. So sorry, I kind of interrupted you, but I feel like it's so powerful.
It is.
You
It is.
know?
And, you're making just some really good points. And everyone doesn't have to give up gluten. It's just like,
Right.
and it doesn't have to be forever either. Like I can actually
Right.
eat a little bit of that now.
Right. You can tolerate a little bit
Yeah.
more, right? But there's a way to have it in your
Yes.
lifestyle so that it's not, because
But you have,
it's practically impossible to not have any, in a way. But
yeah.
go on.
Yeah. But it's also like, you have to leave room for the healing to happen.
Thank you. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
if you refuse to give any time to that, any time for that process to happen, it's never,
You're not going to.
you're never going to get anything different.
Right. Right. Right.
And the other thing that I think is so ironic is that I was so worried about having to give up wheat. And even if, with the traditional allergy testing that they do, most of my allergies and intolerances would not have shown up. And I could have gotten rid of gluten and dairy like perfectly, and I still would have had the problems
Right.
because lots and lots of my things are not true allergies, they're intolerances.
Hey, can we dive into that a little bit? Because one of the things that I noticed in mental health is the connection between allergies and intolerances to, like, our brain health and our moods and our symptoms. And so would you be willing to dive in a little bit more into that?
Yeah. Somebody loaned me a book about 3 or 4 years into my journey that really explained the whole process to me. The book is called An Alternative Approach to Allergies, and it is written by a Dr. Theron Randolph. And in it, he basically he takes us through some of the history of allergies. Back in the 30s, when the AMA was defining all these types of things, they limited an allergy to basically a histamine reaction. Okay, so like a hives or anaphylactic shock or runny nose, that sort of thing. So if you are around or ingest a substance that gives one of those types of reactions, it's considered to be an allergy. And those are the things that we treat with like Benadryl, But there are a whole host of things that can happen that are not inside of that little box. So, if you eat something and you get a pain in your stomach, that's not an allergy. Or if you eat something and get a headache, that's not considered an allergy. So, or if your gut just like says, oh, can't have it, and empties right away, that's not an allergy. So those are all, he calls them intolerances. So I've kind of adopted that myself. But, we forget, I think, sometimes that the brain is a physical organ. And so, some of the emotional, mental problems that people experience are really, it's a reaction that's happening inside the nervous system. And it's no different than a reaction that happens inside the respiratory system or inside the urinary system or the gastrointestinal system. It's, and we really do, with mental health stuff, we have this real tendency to think that like, oh, you can just like, you should be able to just change your mind or like something and like have it be different. But if you're having an inflammation reaction in your brain, I mean, it manifests as anxiety or depression.
Yes.
Or
yes. Yes.
Or hyperactivity.
Yes. 100%. So what you're saying is that sometimes, the symptoms are physical, like a headache or a stomach pain, but sometimes it's a change in your mood, or
Yeah.
you feel more hyper or more activated, or you feel low and slumpy. And
Yes,
so
absolutely. We could take a quick look at one of the charts from his book if you want.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great.
I'm going to share my screen right now. And so I really like the way that he put this chart together. So the center part of the chart is where this is good health, right?
Okay.
Homeostasis means all the body systems are functioning correctly. They're all interacting correctly with each other. Like everything's in balance.
So you're calm, you're balanced, you're level-headed. I'm going to read a little bit so that people can't see the screen. The words are pretty small. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
This is what we expect from other people.
Sure.
Yes. So if you eat something that you are allergic or intolerant to, the first thing that happens is that you actually get a little bit of a boost.
Okay.
So if you think about drinking a cup of coffee, it gives you a little boost. Or eating a candy bar. I mean, eating a candy bar can actually give you a great big boost.
Sure. We've all seen those Snickers commercials.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. So, and our culture really rewards being people who are in a state of very mild stimulation. We're considered to be interesting or like, ambitious or
lively is one of the words here. Lively, energetic. Sure.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if we go past that, though, it starts to become problematic. Getting tense or jittery.
More sensitive,
this is where
argumentative. Yeah, good.
Exactly. And if it keeps ramping up, then we kind of get into aggressive behavior or more anxious or apprehensive. And interestingly enough, he talks about hunger or thirst as being these kind of excitatory, some things that happen.
You might experience in your body. Yes.
Yes. exactly.
So I
So,
feel I'm going to just highlight that. So you as a parent, for example, might see your kid and you're like, I just fed them, and yet they continue to be hungry. They continue to be thirsty. Lots of times what we'll see is red cheeks or red ears. So there's flushing and sweating, but it can be just a little like something. You'll see just a little something, but and so the next level up says more ravenous hunger and excessive thirst, excessive giggling or pathological laughter. So you can't get the kid to settle down. And
mhm,
so I've seen this a lot with families. They're like, what the heck just happened to my kid?
right,
So, right. So
right.
it's really a way in terms of trying to figure out what's going on with somebody in your family. And you can, I don't know how soon and what your experience is, how soon people can expect to experience a change after consuming or after being exposed to this thing that they might be, not necessarily allergic to, but sensitive to. How soon can people expect to see that change?
Yeah, like you just mentioned, it can be almost instantaneous,
Sure,
you know?
sure. So I agree
Yeah,
with you. Like people
yeah,
will be sitting there eating and you'll sometimes see the nose dripping almost immediately. Did you experience that?
yeah,
The coughing,
yeah,
I have friends that like will literally start coughing and they're like, oh no, it's just a cough. Well, it's happened to start only when you started eating, but we don't,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's actually one of my favorite signs, that to me, coughing or having food go down the wrong, tube, I think that's how we like to say it sometimes.
sure.
Um, it's very rare for food to go down a wrong tube and then have something else also trigger that. But if people go back to that same food, like that will be the one that they'll start coughing again. And I think I truly think that it's our body's way of like saying, like, no, not right now. We cannot have this right now, whatever it is, if it's a piece of bread, a lot of times people will cough on the bread, they'll kind of like, take a sip of water, something like that. It'll kind of clear, they eat something else and they go back to that bread and there it is again.
It shows back up.
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Or corn chips. And people always say something like, oh, it's it's just because the chips have hard edges on them or something like that. They'll try to find a reason. But
Yes.
but I've seen it happen with people eating asparagus,
Sure.
which is not like edgy. It's very soft.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
It's a healthy food. Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So even healthy foods aren't healthy for people. So absolutely
yeah,
but your body is talking to you is what I hear you
yeah.
saying.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. That's
So once
exactly
you
right.
figured that out, let's say it's the corn chip and I'm like, gosh, darn it, I love corn chips, and like I notice that whenever I'm eating corn chips, I start coughing. And so I might, so how would to kind of go down that rabbit hole, like what would you suggest that person do taken given this information?
Um, I mean, what I actually, I had a patient with this exact um issue, and I just told her, like when you go to the Mexican restaurant, just don't eat the corn chips before your meal. Like,
Sure,
you know,
sure. Yes.
eat the
Yes.
beans, order
Yes.
something else. But
Right.
like, just for like right now, while you're having this reaction every single time that you eat it,
Yep.
you,
Give it a
you have
break.
to leave it alone.
Yes.
Unless you want to just be coughing in the restaurant all over everybody.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
And aggravating your own lung condition.
Right.
you know Maybe at some point in the future you won't have that reaction anymore, but right now you're having it all the time.
Sure. So what else, like are there other ways for people to figure out like what they're allergic to or what they're sensitive to? So you talked about the skin prick testing. And so are there other tricks that people can do like right at home, things?
You know, being aware actually, and I think a lot of times people don't understand that it's not normal to have like acid reflux or constipation or more than one bowel movement a day or PMS. Like people don't know that these are actually signs of things being off in your body. They're not normal. Western medicine has this very large range of normal, that, and that's why we think that,
Yeah.
Western medicine doesn't think it's like abnormal to skip a day for bowel movements. Chinese medicine is very specific. They say, for good health, like you must have one bowel movement a day, no more, no less.
Yeah.
So, from that perspective, that like, yes, there actually is a normal and all these, everything on this side that Western medicine, they're actually deviations.
Sure.
It's not normal to have PMS.
Right.
Like our body shouldn't randomly hurt when they're doing natural processes.
Right. So how do people so being aware is what you're saying.
Being aware.
And questioning their own symptoms and being willing to say, it's not okay. For you, Miss Drippy Nose, back in the day, like
Exactly.
you had sort of accepted that this is who you are. You had these strategies for collecting the drips,
Yeah.
and in your medical provider. And I'm not picking on you because I've been
I
there
know.
too,
It's-
but is not accepting that. Not accepting that if your kid has a diagnosis that it's ADHD and, you must medicate. And this is the only thing that works. I've been there. I've been the one with the prescription pad saying that until I understood that when we started, and it was honestly allergies and sensitivities, that when I started treating that, I'm like, holy crap, not all of these kids need medications.
right.
Kids were thriving once we addressed the allergies and addressed what was going on and contributing to, falling asleep in the classroom, can't make friends, so tired all the time, doesn't want to do homework,
Mhm.
and but it's because they didn't feel good. Their brain didn't feel good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, and I taught school for a year in Arizona, and there was one kid in particular in my class who was severely like ADD, ADHD, and you just look at kids like that, and like it, like they don't feel good. They can barely be inside their bodies. It does
Yes.
not feel good. It just
Right.
doesn't. You
Right.
know,
Kids don't want to feel like that.
No, nobody wants to feel like that. It's
And
awful.
and they don't have the language and the resources really to figure out how to change what's going into their body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And if you've lived with that all your life, you do think it's normal. You don't know anything else.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
like how would they ever know?
Yes. And I think that's where the blind spots and knowing that we have blind spots is really something that I've been trying to put out there is, ask questions, share your story, reach out to people that resonate with you, reach out to people you trust so that you can learn and figure out what your blind spots are, because we all have them,
Absolutely.
you
I
know?
had no idea that it was abnormal to have to go to the bathroom after every meal
Right.
as a child.
Right.
I had no idea that
Right.
that
That
was
wasn't
not, I
normal.
mean,
It was not health. You weren't in a healthy place.
mm-mm. No,
Yes.
no, and my parents would kind of give me a little bit of crap about that because like
Yes.
you're trying to get out of cleaning up. after dinner. I'm like, you want a mess in the kitchen, but also at 6 or like,
I
I didn't,
experienced the opposite as a parent, and my son was always in the bathroom, like just taking forever. And I would be like, oh my gosh, I asked him to do the dishes. Of course, he's disappeared for 3 hours in the bathroom. Like, but I wasn't paying attention. I didn't know. I didn't realize, oh, constipation, that's a problem. And what I didn't know is it was affecting his brain as well. And there were all kinds of things, poor kid, like I wasn't listening to him, I didn't
right.
know. And so it in a way, I'd like to tell people it's not your fault,
Yeah.
but so talk to people. And if
Yeah.
somebody's like, oh yeah, that's normal, like, and because we know
Yeah.
intuitively, it's like you saying you didn't want to go get the skin prick test because you're like, I don't want them to tell me like I shouldn't have gluten or dairy, And
Yeah.
it's a great story because I heard that a bunch of times. Like, I don't want to get my labs done. What if something's wrong? So
Yeah.
how do we push through that mindset, Jen? Like help us with that.
Um, for me, it really helps now that I understand that almost all problems are fixable and they are temporary.
Yes.
Um, so, even if I did have to, um, adjust my diet again, like I know now that I'll have to do it for a while, but probably not the rest of my life. Do you know what I mean? Like I can allow my body time to heal, or I can go and get medical help with things that I need medical help with. And like I just don't, almost everything is fixable. And where people get into trouble is pretending that the problems aren't there, or that they're going to just magically go away without doing something different.
Yes.
That's where the snowball kind of starts to happen. And there's a very large correlation between people who suffer allergies like hay fever and people who get cancer. So in Chinese medicine, this is cancer is usually a phlegm and qi stagnation. So like literally that phlegm that is just like being produced all the time by the hay fever people can, and not in every case, but one of the things that can happen if it's just allowed to be there, covered up with like whatever, you know, can turn into cancer. And it's so much easier to deal with it when it's just a hay fever. I mean, you do have to be willing to make adjustments. It's not, if you have to eat a certain way and that's the only way you can be, that's the only way you can eat, then you're going to get what you're going to get. And
Right.
whatever that ends up being.
Right. I think, helping people acknowledge that, first of all, in a way, it's not their fault because of what the food industry has done, in terms of making us want to crave the same kinds of foods that are making us not feel good. So in a way, understanding that it's not your fault,
Yeah.
but to give it an opportunity. And so like what I loved about your story was like within a very short period of time, your symptoms started sloughing away.
It was really amazing to live through. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was
Yeah.
truly life changing.
Yes. Yes. And truly, I'm experiencing this with a family member right now that has been dealing with health issues for years. And, she finally got like the right kind of help and is starting to change her diet. And she's like so excited. But one of the things that I shared with her was like, you don't have to quote unquote give up all of your favorite foods. a lot of times it's about like the things that we think we could never give up. Like it turns out it's just a craving. It's just in a way, and I say just an addiction, because I did see on the top of your sheet, it did say something about addiction and allergies,
Mhm.
basically. But in a way, eating the things that are not serving us is just an addiction. And when we break up with that thing, we don't crave it as we don't crave it. It goes away. But it's about replacing and finding things that bring you joy and satisfaction. It was just Super Bowl Sunday here. And, it's like you don't have to give up dip. You just figure out how to find some amazing dips, that are healthier for you. You don't,
Yeah.
you can healthy things, recipes up, and you can just find the things that bring you satisfaction, and you don't feel deprived. I don't feel deprived.
No, I always tell people that I eat like a king
Yes.
or a
Yeah.
queen, I suppose I should say.
Yes. Like the goddess that you are.
Right, but I eat food, it tastes so good,
Yes.
and because with every up, there's a corresponding down,
Sure.
right? So that's part of that cycle, is that, after you get those kind of like, after you get popped up, the sugar rush is followed by the sugar crash. And that feels so bad to people, that they want to get out of it. Of course, like nobody wants to feel bad. It's completely normal to then want to reach for something that's going to put you up again.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Yes.
we're wired that way.
Yes. Yeah. So, one of the things that I've noticed in my own health and journey is like, especially when my gut was more compromised, but I would notice almost immediately putting a food item in my mouth, and I would get like, I had literally a softball injury in my right shoulder. And when I would eat the food that I shouldn't have been eating at the time, I would literally get a throb in that shoulder. And it took
Mhm.
me the longest time to make that relationship. And I wish for families like that they could address that stuff and teach their kids in a way to listen to their bodies. And so, you
Yeah.
know, are there other tips or other ideas and other things that you've noticed in your journey, like of things that people can do? Paying attention to it is huge.
Yeah. One of my rules of thumb is that you should feel the same after you eat as you did before you eat, just
Yeah.
not hungry.
Okay. That's great.
So, like, if you didn't have a headache before you started eating, then you shouldn't have a headache after. Do you know what I mean? Like,
That's awesome. That's a
um,
great tip. I love that. Yeah, so paying attention.
yeah,
I also like if something does show up for you, really trying to think about what was sort of the last thing I did, what was the last thing I ate, and really trying to make that relationship.
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
my nose started dripping after lunch, like what did I have for lunch kind of thing,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And just
absolutely.
do you feel like people can take notes? Like it's something I've always recommended for my families, and I don't know really how it goes for you and your clients. Like, do people like take notes? Because I feel like
I
people
think,
that
yeah, is
have
one of the very most helpful things that people can do.
do some tracking.
Yeah, yeah,
What do you suggest for people to do some tracking of their symptoms?
yeah. So part of my program is teaching people how to make how to make a record of, it doesn't even have to be very long. Like sometimes even half of a day is enough.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be a long record. I always like to shoot for 2 days when I do this.
Sure.
Because
Yeah,
after 2 days, at some point something will happen and I'll like get
sure.
off track. Rabbit. Um, But having things written down does two things. One, it brings it to your immediate attention right now. And it also gives you a record that you can look back on later, or you can show to someone else.
Yes.
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 So
Yeah, especially for somebody else to review, because sometimes, like I mentioned, we have blind spots, and sometimes it does help for someone else to take a look and like, what am I missing?
absolutely.
Yes.
And the other thing that I tell people is just don't make it easy for yourself. Like, don't feel like you have to be super specific. Sometimes I am really super specific, but if it's going to be just a struggle to write anything down, then just anything that you write down is better than nothing.
That's right. That's good. Yes. Do the best you can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Like,
And we do,
it doesn't have to look a certain way.
right. Do you like recommend an app per se? Because I'm like thinking as, we all have smartphones usually, and like most of us have something that we would
Yeah,
could take
there's
notes
a
on.
couple apps that I found. I was using one a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's still around. It looks like I think there was a good one at mysymptoms.com.
Okay.
And then let's see here. And then I also found one called Food Diary.
Okay.
And I haven't really played with these. I meant to play with them and then just forgot. So, but
So how do we do it? So like, let's say, the family's sitting down to dinner and they're having, tonight, it's going to be some soup and, BLTs on, gluten-free bread, and so
sure.
like, and so the little Johnny, is like, nose starts dripping, like before dinner's over. So how do you recommend sort of teasing out and figuring out what things might be contributing?
Okay, so the example that you have given, soup, we'll say, what kind of soup is it going to be? Tomato?
Carrot ginger.
Oh, carrot ginger soup. Okay.
It's so
so so you could take a couple of different approaches. You can give Johnny each of those. You could give him the carrot ginger soup at another meal and see if his nose drips, but without the other two items that you said.
great.
Or you can give little Johnny the gluten-free bread, which you probably already done. Like, if it was the bread, you probably would know.
Maybe. But Johnny's had
Unless
a
it's a
runny
new kind
nose.
of bread.
You said a runny nose and belly aches for a long time. So we're trying to figure out as a family, like, what is it that's might be
Yep.
contributing, so.
Yeah. So what I usually recommend actually is that people just give whatever foods might be kind of in isolation.
Yeah.
So
Maybe or do the carrot ginger soup and then an hour later eat the rest of dinner or whatever. Right.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Separate them out.
Yep. And I also recommend that you break down the components of the soup, instead of making it a carrot ginger soup. Like, what happens when he just eats cooked carrots, or like puree, like a bowl of carrot?
Good.
Which is kind of a weird thing to think about, but often I can tease out intolerances simply by asking people, like, okay, so if I give you a bowl of cooked carrots, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Like, how much of it do you want to eat?
Right.
And if people say something like, oh, I definitely wouldn't eat them by themselves, or I would want to put some like butter on it or something like that, that's a clue to me that they probably don't, probably the cooked carrots are not that good for them. Or if they say, well, I'd be fine for a few bites, like that's probably what their serving size of that food should be.
I see. Yeah.
So, you know, if you
Although I
try to
would,
like,
yeah, I would just add to that as a sort of an exception to that. I feel like when people have been eating a highly processed, kind of what we call the standard American diet, if your kid is only like boxed mac and cheese and, you know, this brand of chicken nuggets and this brand of pancakes, and I've met families where that's kids don't even have that many food items on their list. So if they've had a very restrictive diet and like their taste buds are not per se going to desire the carrots, it's something
sure,
that has to be, you know, we have to clean up and really start to expand the diet, because usually the restricted eating has to do with nutritional deficiencies to begin with. So they might not want it or crave it. So the
sure.
cravings I find come a little bit after somebody's been eating healthier for a while. You know, I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
And the ability to kind of abstractly think about that is not something that I would expect a child to have anyway.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. But
But
guidance for
also,
parents too, to
if
be,
Johnny has never liked carrots,
yeah.
you know, I would kind of go to the carrot ginger soup first.
Yes. Right. So I agree with you. So like, yes. So a lot of times kids know, yeah, like they truly, and sometimes it's the textures, the cooked versus the raw is like one's more digestible for that person than the other. And so truly, yes, in a way, listening to what your kid's telling you, you
Yeah.
know, well, that gives me a bellyache, you know. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's a behavior because they really just want the cupcake. And they're like, oh, I don't
Right.
want that. But they're like, can I have that cupcake? You know, sometimes it's,
Yes.
but, you know, but just to give families a tool, something
Yeah.
to be thinking about in a different way. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. And where you are now with your own health journey, like how are things going? Because I know you said you can eat some of the things that you couldn't do before, and you know
Yeah.
like, do you feel like you're managing your symptoms, and you know how
Yeah, I
soon do
really
you
do.
know? How soon do you know after you eat something? Like if you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have eaten that.
One thing that I think people don't they don't understand is that it's constantly our bodies are kind of constantly in flux as to like what we need nutritionally. Like what I need today is not actually what I needed last week, is not what I needed 3 years ago, is not what I needed when I was 25. You know, there's some commonalities, but like, you know, the nuts and bolts of it can really be pretty different. So right now, like this exact moment, I'm getting over being sick. So I'm being very careful not to eat any dairy at all because I know that there is still some phlegm that as I was getting sick, when I would eat the dairy, that phlegm really kind of like it magnified the phlegm. So for right now, I'm completely leaving it out until this phlegm is completely gone.
Yep.
In general, I can eat some dairy and not, you know, not too much problems,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, because my immune system is a little bit low right now. Also, I don't want to give it anything else to do.
Sure. Right.
So
Yes. You want to give it a chance to recover.
yes, absolutely.
Right.
But
Right.
you know, after I'm fully better, then you know, I'm sure I'll go back to having my nice fresh mozzarella cheese with my lunch because it's delicious.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there's some dairy that I just don't really eat
Right.
because it just doesn't it like I know it makes me flummy. Like yogurt makes me kind of flummy.
Yep. Right. So we just
So
avoid it.
yeah, just
Yes.
avoid it.
And do you do like a non-dairy yogurt, like a coconut yogurt or something?
Um,
Does
in
it make a
general,
difference?
I haven't. My food intolerances, particularly at the beginning, were so vast. Like I was allergic to all grains,
Yep.
soy, Coconut was a really big one for me. Uh, dairy, apples, like there were random things that just like almonds.
Yeah.
And so my initial kind of diet switch just didn't include any of the like gluten-free things because they all had something in them that I was intolerant to,
Yes.
which is also why it wouldn't have worked if I had just gone off of wheat
Right.
or gluten.
Right.
Like
Just
it wouldn't have
one
worked.
thing. One
Yeah.
thing wasn't enough.
Yeah.
I think that's
Taking,
an excellent point. Like oftentimes these things run in clusters. And so really getting
yeah.
to a truly clean diet and really getting down to the bare bones is one of the things that I do in my program is teach people how to get to the bare bones and then
Yeah.
be able to reintroduce things so that for really each family member who's tolerating what,
Yeah.
so absolutely.
Yeah.
And so and the tricky thing is sometimes healthy things are making us sick and we don't even know it.
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely.
Something what you mentioned, soy was one of the things and coconut was one of the things, but one of the things I realized is that, so a lot of times allergies and sensitivities, like there's more than one thing. And the other thing is a lot of times our food, but our supplements will contain, like soy is one that's very commonly in supplements. Corn is another one. And so I
Mhm.
know families that have kids with corn allergies and they've been giving them supplements for a long time and nobody told them that they were actually in the supplements, so
Right.
yeah, that's something to just speak to briefly is that these allergens can be in the lotion that we're using and those things. And so sometimes we really have to like look at the whole home with a detective perspective and say what else could be contributing to this sort of
Yeah.
toxic bucket. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that goes there can be an overlap with the seasonal allergies as well. One of the things that I am most allergic to from an infant, my mom would put me in the grass and I would get like hives
Yep.
on my skin where I was touching the grass. And I'm allergic. Grains are all grasses. So now when it comes to be grass season, I'm extra careful about not including any grains in what I'm eating because I know it's already coming in from the outside.
Yep.
So
That's beautiful. I love that. So keeping the toxic load is
yeah,
minimal. Right.
that's
That's
exactly
great.
right.
That's great. And being an acupuncturist, I don't think you and I have talked about this before, but are there certain acupuncture points or things that like when your allergies are acting up, is there something like that people can do? Is there any tricks or things that you send people home with, like to do some of those pressure points themselves for headaches or nausea, or is there anything that you teach your people?
That's a good question. I don't very often teach people unless they ask. The Chinese have a nice, anytime they have congestion, their first go-to is some kind of like a self massage kind of
Sure.
around the sinuses and the eyes. And I'm trying to think, oh, they do one like this. No,
Okay.
it's like this.
Yes.
Really kind of scrubbing on the sides of the nose. You can see how my nose is getting kind of red.
Yeah.
You can actually do the same thing behind the ears. So kind of on that bone behind your ears,
Do a
just
little
get it
self
nice
drainage.
and warmed up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I and those things can be helpful. Alone, I have not ever found anything that is really particularly for the allergies, you have to take the things out of the diet.
Yeah.
Especially if you have more than like one thing. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? If you don't take them out of the diet, they're always there irritating your system.
Period.
So if you leave them there, they will continue to irritate.
Yes. Thank you that you said it. That's absolutely right. You can take the pills, you can go to the acupuncturist, you can go to the chiropractor, you might get some relief,
Yeah. You
but
can
the
scrub your face
symptoms,
all
you
day.
can scrub it all day long, but it's not going to bring you into that healing place until you eliminate and let your body heal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's where like I hear people's resistance. Well, I'm not giving up my blah, blah, blah. Well, reach
Right.
out for some help with that. And we can help you, support you around,
Yes.
eliminating those things and helping you find and figure out what's going on, because your moods, your behaviors, your energy, your focus, your runny nose, your bathroom habits, they're telling you something. And so lots of times we think of mood changes as a psychiatric issue, but I think what you're highlighting today is it could just be something that you're consuming every day.
Yeah.
And you could
It's
clean it
still
all up.
based in physical organs.
That's right. That's absolutely right. That's awesome. Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners today? And can you tell us how to get in touch with you if somebody wanted to work with you?
Absolutely. The name of my business is briggshealth.com. That's BRIGGSHEALTH.com. So you can find me there. And the program that I teach is called Nutrition Revolution System.
Cool.
And so you can find me on Facebook with that name. And also there will be a website up soon with that name, nutritionrevolutionsystem.com.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. This is great. Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners in terms of takeaways or last thoughts?
I think mainly just, this idea that if you want to have your health be different, you can,
Nice.
and
You don't have to live with it.
you don't have to live with it. You
That's
don't have to suffer. And when you eliminate that suffering from your life, or that thing that you're managing, you have energy to do things that are truly important to you.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, if it's gardening or, playing with your grandkids, or, going to work every day, because these kinds of problems can keep people home from work. It's not, so, you can get better but you have to want to have your life be
Different.
just a little different. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. How do you want your story to end is how I like to say that. How do you want your
Yes.
story to go?
It's wonderful.
Yes.
And you're doing such good work with people, Peggy. I just think it's really wonderful.
Thank you.
To see the Jennifer. Change.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your valuable insight. And we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Awesome,
Peggy.
Jennifer. Awesome. Have an awesome day.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Bye.